Hello and welcome to my Autism Ally podcast, where we come together to share helpful information about autism.
Greetings, my Autism Ally podcast listeners. When we last chatted, Samantha and myself thought we were just taking a well-deserved extended holiday break. We did not know that instead it would turn into a winter that brought us both unexpected personal challenges that neither of us will soon forget. As we all know, challenges bring change, and change can bring growth. We will certainly remember the past 3 months, perhaps not fondly, but definitely with clarity. A clarity that has confirmed the importance of our mission and will allow us to adapt and grow to serve those in our autism community. Thank you for your continued support and patience.
In this episode, we're speaking about raising those on the spectrum, and we're speaking with Jill about her son. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, Jill. Thank you for coming to the program today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your child with autism.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Jill. I've got my 2 boys, Austin, 15, Everett is 13, and Austin was diagnosed with what they called classic autism back when he was 22 months old, which basically just means he doesn't check most of the boxes. He checks every single one of the boxes for autism and would be considered severe. My husband is an anesthesiologist here in town, and I have recently elected to be on the school board. That's really, and our dog, Clark W. Griswold.
I just love the name.
That's about it. That wraps us up.
That's good.
Does Austin understand what autism is? Let's start there before I ask if you have told him he has autism, because I'm just curious. You know, you mentioned he's considered severe. Does he understand that there is a difference?
No. We always talk to him as if he did.
Mm-hmm.
What we've told him in the past is that God created him in his image and perfect and beautiful, but his brain just operates differently. He's nonverbal. So, I mean, we try to be aware to talk to him all the time as if he understood everything. Mm-hmm. Obviously, sometimes we kind of forget and take for granted that we can't get any real feedback from him, but we try to keep that in the front of our minds and be cognizant of talking to him as if he did. And time again, he's shown that he understands a lot more than people think he does. So that's kind of what we falter to.
That's always something that I try to stress with even my son, who's more impacted on the spectrum, is to always presume competence and understanding.
Yes.
Regardless of the professional you're working with. Sometimes you get surprised when you're dealing with people in the education system, sometimes even people in the medical field.
Yes.
They'll deal with the individual as if they're dealing with you more than with them. And making them switch that focus is sometimes challenging. So what kind of activities or maybe stages of life do you think have been a struggle for your child and your family?
Oh boy, that's a loaded one. I feel like that if there is a phase to go through, we've gone through most, if not all of them. Now, don't get me wrong. Autism is so unique in every person that I'm sure there are many, many, many phases and journeys that people have had that we have not. But in the ones that you hear about the most, I'd probably say we've had quite a lot of them. Obviously, him losing language and not being able to communicate with us was a tough one. He kind of has his own language now. He'll say a few words that we understand. At one point, after he lost language, he then started to add a syllable onto each word. So instead of bed, he would say bedis, or outside became sidus, or kind of his own little pig Latin, I guess. I don't know, but he would have a few words that, and still does, that he uses that we understand, but others typically don't. he has been able to start to use a lamp device that he has caught on to pretty quickly. So that's been great. He's been able to use that. Gosh, we've had a bunch. The worst was we went through a 2-year period where he did a lot of self-harm. It got pretty bad. He's never been aggressive to anyone else. He's a pretty keep to himself kind of kid. He's very low key. He's been loving his whole life. So this was a real shock to not only see him self-harm, but to even be show any kind of aggression or violence, never to anyone else, but to himself. It was not only out of character, but obviously painful and extremely terrifying. He would start hitting his head upstairs and we could hear it from downstairs. I know one day he needs help. We need to bathe him. He can't bathe himself. And there was one day when I put him in the shower, got him undressed, and I was shocked at his body. He had bruises and scratches and even blood from head to toe. And I just fell to my...
It's
Sorry.
hard.
It is hard. It is very hard, and it's okay.
I fell to my knees and started sobbing.
Yeah.
And immediately sent pictures to our BCBA and his doctor. And but we got through it. Praise God. It was every day. And again, it lasted about 2 years, but we were very blessed to get the name of a really great doctor down at Peyton Manning. And she addressed those concerns. She thought a certain med might help. And I mean, it went away like that. So we are really so thankful that is behind us. But, it's another experience and a journey that we have gone through that hopefully now we can be a source of comfort and reassurance and encouragement to someone else who might be going through that. But that's one of a few hard ones. So I gave you the hardest one.
That's okay. And, part of the reason we are doing this podcast is so that we can share our story and our journey with others, so that we can take away some of the stigma with some of these more significant behaviors. I know when I talk to families, they are overwhelmed and they don't know what to do, and they're afraid to say things because, the next thing, they're almost afraid of can this get worse, and there must not be anything out there to help us. So I'm thrilled that you were able to share that no, there was something out there that helped, and that medication can be a positive thing for these types of behaviors as well. I sometimes have conversations with families about they don't want to try that, that they don't feel like that's an option, or that they're drugging up their individual. And sometimes I try to point out about other medical conditions, and that medication's a tool. It's not always the right tool, but sometimes it's a tool that gets us to a better place.
Well, it was a huge blessing for us. And, our goal is to not have him on any meds at some point. But if there is something out there that's going to keep him from knocking himself out or causing him bodily injury, we're going to take it.
Yeah.
And thankfully it was, it helped immediately. We're grateful for that.
Huh.
Exactly. It shows exactly the challenges. I mean, there are times that when you have a more impacted child on the autism spectrum, it is the unexpected moments that take you by surprise emotionally. Like, I remember sobbing at my daughter's graduation because I knew that was never going to happen for him. Same way with getting a driver's license. I remember sobbing inside the car with Matthew in the back seat and Katie in the driver's license branch, getting her, getting her photo and getting the license. And I remember thinking how stupid it was that I'm sitting here crying, but it's like somebody, you go through all the stages of grief when your child gets diagnosed with autism, because the child that you thought, the dreams that you had associated with that child change.
Susan, I can't tell you, I couldn't agree with you more. Things that you don't even expect. And where those moments of something happens with your other child, and then all of a sudden you have that realization it's never going to happen for him. And like you said, it's like the first days all over again and grieving that life.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean I don't love the life I have today with him, but
that's right.
I know that over the last 18 years since my son's diagnosis, the dreams have changed. The journey and the goal of the journey has changed. And even when you first get that diagnosis, you still have this, okay, well, maybe we can get here. And then you get a little further along in your journey and you all of a sudden realize, okay, that's not going to be possible. So now we have to shift and reframe that. And now let's aim for making it here. And I think it's sometimes harder for families who have a child that's more impacted, because there's this presumption that all these great interventions and all this stuff, and we can make your child so that your child doesn't look like they have autism to the average public. And not every story or every journey ends that way.
One of the things that happened right after Austin was born, everything you just said, right away, because of our deep-seated faith in the Lord, Scott and I both, we were devastated. I mean, I was on autopilot for a good couple of years, but because of that, we really felt like, okay, we were desperate to find anyone to say, your life can still be joyful, not despite this, but brace yourself because of this.
Yep.
And it was hard for us to find that. I mean, especially back then, as you know, Susan, because when Austin was diagnosed, it was still 1 in 10,000. I mean, we'd heard of autism, but we didn't even know what it was.
Yep.
There were no clinics here. There was one BCBA in all of Northern Indiana. I mean, it was a desert.
Yes.
And we went to our first autism conference just trying to, I know what I was after. I was, Scott, he's type A and he wants information. I wanted to see those families of kids or young adults that were older and what their lives looked like. And I wanted to find that joy. I wanted to find that, we're different. Our celebrations and victories are going to look a little bit different. Our struggles are going to look a little bit different, but this life is still joyful and beautiful. And I was desperate for that. And I'm really thankful to say that I feel like that is where we've been for a long time now. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean we don't have our horrible days or even stretches of time of struggle, but because of our relationship with God, I firmly believe that he gave or allowed this family of ours. And the sooner we were ready to find purpose in that, and to use our circumstances and to show the world what a beautiful child our son was, the more we found that peace and that joy. And because of that, I feel like Austin has really changed a lot of lives.
Oh, definitely. Now, I have a question for both of you, because mine's high functioning. So some of what you guys are saying, I remember when mine was little feeling that way, until we got to certain points. And then it was like, okay, then what do you do? But when you guys were in those moments, what did you do for yourselves? because for me as a mom, I struggle, and I'm sure most of our parents do, that whole self-care factor. But when you have a more impactful child, that is a lot more work and a lot more time on a parent, which is totally, I stay up late. I do whatever I need to do to help my kid. But, when it's a lot more impactful, that is a lot more on you. What are you guys doing to bounce back from, all of it, what are you guys doing to help? Because I think a lot of our families who do have those higher impact children need to hear, yes, I do self-care, but this is, the struggle's real. We're all saying, the struggle is real.
The struggle is real. And I think the struggle is 1,000 times harder with COVID.
Yeah.
All of the things that I used to do when pre-COVID, a lot of those disappeared. I was big on making sure that I went out and had a girls' night out with my best friend from high school on a relatively regular basis, like monthly. And that was kind of like the one night that, I'd leave and I'd be gone for the evening. So now I think it comes in bits and pieces. But I do, what I would say to those who have a more significantly impacted child is to make sure that you keep some of those relationships, because it is really easy to get, there are going to be people that exit your life because they want you to put in more effort than what you can give to maintain that relationship. And so I recently saw this Facebook meme that some of my friends shared, and I loved, because it was like, if you're the type of person that needs me to be reaching out to you weekly, then that's too much maintenance. I can't do that. I need the type of friends that it's like, it's okay if I don't reach out for a month or two, and then I go, hey, let's go do coffee. And they're okay with that.
That was me. That was
I know that was you. But
Because
I so
true.
identified with that. And I felt like even during this time, because of the pandemic, that's even more true. Yeah, I want to check in with people, and I have the best of intentions, but I got a to-do list a mile long. And my son on the spectrum is just one of the things that's occupying so much of my time. And I'm sure Jill can identify with that, because she mentioned that she's a school board member. We're trying to do all these things, and we're still trying to make other aspects of our life happen, whether it's caring for aging parents or taking care of a child. When you have children, you have this envision that sometime in their 20s, they're going to move out, they're going to be on their own, and you don't, and it's going to be you and your husband again. Well, that's not my reality.
Or mine.
So
I'm a lifer.
So, you take those moments where you can get them. Sometimes it's, doing yoga, and sometimes it's going out to coffee with friends, and sometimes it's sitting down and relaxing with a good book. But I don't anticipate it to happen as much right now. So I don't. Yeah. That was a long answer. Sorry.
No, you're good. So Jill, what about you? I mean, well, you've got so much going on too, but tell us, what do you do? I know you're a coffee drinker, but
my word, incessant. Yeah. In the early years, I didn't do anything. I was a zombie. I didn't care for myself at all. Unhealthy.
Those horrible days, right?
Poor choices. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that wasn't helping anyone. But I would say that once I pulled myself together and really gave this all back to God, I gave Austin back to God, I gave myself back to him and leaned into it. In fact, I still remember going to this very, very first support group. I use that in quotes. And I was pregnant with our second boy. So Austin, I mean, he was brand new. He had just been diagnosed and we were still reeling from it all. And it was not helpful at all. It was just a bunch of parents that were angry about the schools and talking about that. And as we left, one woman said, Jill, let me tell you something. The sooner you get over the why me, the why him, the better it'll be. And at the time I thought, what a horrible instance. I wanted to slap her on the backside of the head. I couldn't, I'm emotional. I'm pregnant.
Oh yeah, that doesn't help.
Right. And yet 13 years later, I still think of that and how true, even though crass it may have been at the time. Maybe she could have timed that out a little better, but I think about it all the time that really the sooner you get over the why him, the why us, the why me, and you just lean into it and get on that mission and okay, what are we going to do now? How are we going to use this? How are we going to help our son? How are we going to help others? I mean, I feel like that's been a huge part of my healing is that Scott and I decided from day one that we felt so blessed with the resources that we had and the unbelievable people that God put in our path that we wanted to use. It all is because of him. So we wanted to take what we had been given and share it however we could, because all I would think about is what about these single parents out there? What about those that have families that are not supportive? And it broke my heart for them, for their kids. And so then it just became our ministry. What are we going to do? What are we going to do that's not only going to benefit Austin, but all these other kids out there that maybe don't have access to the same things that our son does, or these poor parents that are just trying to keep their head above water. And so one of the first things we did was set up a fund, an autism fund for our local district. And then we made it a mission to come alongside our school. We never wanted to be those, that support group did do me good because I never wanted to become that. I grew up with public educators in my family, and that was important to me. This public education could be the only chance that some of our kids really get, where they get the things that they need. Yep. And so we said, okay, our mission is going to be to come alongside the school and figure out what can we do? What can we do for our students? What can we do for our families to support them and get them the programming and the resources they need? That was extremely therapeutic.
And I'll piggyback on that, because that was one of the things that, like, when Matthew was first diagnosed, I was the type of person that was like, okay, I got to learn everything about autism and I've got to do it now. And my husband, Mr. Engineer, was like, I don't care what it takes, but we need to fix this. And it became, and that,
I love it.
It's one of those things that also in it itself was this journey for both of us, because when you first get this diagnosis, you think that might be possible. And then it's more of this shift, this mental shift and shift in understanding. You don't know what you don't know when you first get this diagnosis. And so, a few years into this progress, it's like, no, the person that's going to get fixed here isn't going to be him or our son. It's going to be us.
Right.
That's shift in understanding was huge. And then it became about, okay, we're fortunate. We had great insurance, we had opportunities, we had things that we could do, but look at all these other people that didn't have those things. And so for me, it was like, okay, I want to be a part of something to make things that are happening in other communities in our states, let's make them happen here. And so
and you're still doing it.
And so that is probably what drives me more than anything else, is I see or hear about something that's great happening for families, and I'm like, wow, that's great if you can afford it. Oh, That's great if you can drive clear to Indy or wherever to access that. But how are we going to improve the day and lives of everyday families in our community that don't have that luxury?
Yes.
Well, so
you've given your entire career to it, which is beautiful.
Well, you both have hit a good point. So that education piece for your individual, what describe some of those education experiences, because obviously it looks different than my kiddo who's high functioning. So kind of help families who are maybe right at that beginning, I don't want to say what to expect because obviously it's going to be different for every person. But what did you see in your child's education experience so far? Because both of yours are still in school. What is your suggestions to families who are going through that education process with their individual? What are some things that you guys have learned? Because my journey was totally different. I had to struggle with them understanding just because we're high functioning and we're getting pass plus grades doesn't mean that we're not emotionally struggling with all of this, we're, not having meltdowns and internalizing and, we're that odd kid in the corner rocking,
it's funny, Sam, because I've thought about you and other families like that who, spending even a couple minutes with a child or young adult, you wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, I think it would be more difficult. I mean, the struggles at home for we moms with children who are more impaired, that's obvious. But I do think that being out in the community, that struggle might be even harder than ours when it's hard for anyone to see that disability and therefore be understanding, be empathetic. So
you're gonna make me cry. You're gonna make me cry because
I'll be honest with you. I agree with Jill. I think it's much harder to have a child that has the invisible struggles that's in the gen ed setting because it's not like autism has a look. Where if you have a more impacted child, we interact with our kids differently in public. And I even still do it now. And I'd be curious if Jill does the same. I will be with Matthew and we'll be somewhere and I'll go, hey, Matthew, can you say hi to, so-and-so. And that immediately gives that person the heads up that the individual can't do that on their own. So obviously there's something different. I'm structuring those interactions so that the person on the other end understands there's a limitation. Whereas individuals who are higher functioning don't get the benefit of that because they're relying on themselves to be able to do that interaction.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think important for other parents to hear is like you just said, to kind of cultivate that, to make them interact with people around them. Like you said, Susan, it's not only a great indicator that, hey, there's something going on over here. So please be patient, please be kind. But one of the things that I'm sure we've had some teachers probably in the past throughout the years that have thought, why is he here? He needs too much help. But RBCBA from day one said, get him in school, get him in as many gen ed classes as possible. Now, for the first few years, every single year, I had his teacher say, I had no idea he could do fill in the blank. I had more than one year where teachers would call crying, saying that I never thought he could do this. And guess what he did today? So, in those first years, it's incredibly important to set that bar high. I would say even higher than what the parents think they're capable of. It's the same rationale for talking to them as if they didn't have any kind of cognitive disability. You just talk to them and pray that as much sinks in, because we don't know, especially if they're nonverbal. But I would say always set that bar high, always try, get them out in the community. I know a lot of our parents, and I was one of them for sure, still am sometimes, that I have to remind myself that it's easier to stay home. Absolutely. In particular, in a smaller community, these are going to be the people that our kids live with for the rest of their lives, potentially. And the more that they know them and that our kids know the community, the safer of an environment we create for them. So to get them out there, for people to know their name. I mean, I don't know how long we would go out to a game or go shopping and more people would say hi Austin than hi to any of us. He took direction from his peers better than his teachers. So not only was he learning from them, but they absolutely were learning from him too.
Isn't that cool? I love that.
So cool. And I wish that, what I would like to say to teachers out there too, is that even if they're not, now that Austin's in high school, he's not going to be going to biology. We know that. And he's going to pull back a little more from gen ed and focus on life skills. But the reason why he continues to go is to keep those relationships intact. It's so imperative, and everybody wins. So, the neurotypical kids in those class learn a lot from our kids being included with them. Again, everybody wins. So I would say to really push for those gen ed classes. My other advice would be to work with the school. Don't be careful not to burn any bridges. Always be kind and respectful, even as frustrating as it may be, to stay composed. And again, we want to partner with our schools. You get a lot farther with that than going in with guns ablazing and thinking that you're the mama bear. I hear that a lot. I was the mama bear and I'm going to fight. And I get that. I get that mentality for sure. But that doesn't always win the day.
Well, and it's because that parents, I always, you bring up a really good point. Everybody's on the same team here. Everybody's on team Austin. Everybody's on team Matthew when we're talking about that school setting. Sometimes what gets lost in the translation, and what I try to remind families, and I'm sure Sam does too, is sometimes schools are limited by what is state law to be able to give to individuals with disabilities. It's not because they don't want to, it's because there's laws in place. And that's just a challenge for families. I think that along with learning about everything else that's out there, there's this whole hurdle about special education law and what's an appropriate setting for your child. And I totally agree with the plugins for gen ed. The gen ed kids learn a lot about their peers that are developmentally delayed or even intellectually delayed. There's a benefit. There's a two-way street that goes on there. And that's the part that, I'm facing that cliff. Matthew's 20. So we've only got a couple of more years of school. And then you go, now what?
Now what?
And that's a little bit scary because for typical kids, now what's a little bit more mapped out. You go to school, you get your diploma, you decide whether you're going to trade school or you're going to college or whether you're just going to go straight into employment. For our kids, that's a lot more. There's not as much out there. There's not as much out there. And you're all of a sudden looking at, well, I don't want them home all day. I want them to be out into the community in something that's meaningful to them, and what those adult services look like vary dramatically from county to county, let alone, different organizations in the city.
Well, you talking about that, Susan, brings up a question I have for Jill. Have you guys thought about what that next step looks like for Austin? Have you guys, does he have certain interests that you think seem like something he would want to do? Like, just curious.
That we're in the throes of that right now, even though, he's 15, but as we all know, that's going to be here in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
That's a stressful one. Austin, here are his favorite things to do: STEM,
Mhm.
walk around the house,
Mhm.
take showers, and listen to music. So we're trying to find a job that can incorporate all those things. I think we're going to be hard pressed to find that, but we've not given up on that yet. Of course, we've been looking into group homes. Our BCBA very much believes in as much dependency as possible. I do too, but if I had it my way, I would build his own little house in our front yard and have a connecting hallway. What's wrong with that?
That's what we're doing. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, we are actually in the swells of trying to figure out building, so we're like, well, if we're going to build a house, our kid doesn't need us 24/7, so building like an apartment, in-law suite, or whatever they want to call it in building terms, where he has a hallway and a door that he can keep open when he's okay with us being around, and keep it shut when he needs time to himself, but that we have easy access, because ours spirals, and when we spiral, he doesn't always ask for help. So he needs to be able to have that easy connection without us burdening him with being his parents.
Right.
Well, okay, so you bring that up, and I'm curious. I have a little bit of that now because I take care of my father, so our home's kind of set up for that. But I want to twist that just a little bit, Jill, and go, what does it look like for Austin after you've died? Because, you're not going to live forever. How's that sibling relationship? Is that at play? How does that look in your family?
Unlike a lot of other families, we do have to be prepared for, our child cannot live on his or her alone. So we have to have something. What would happen if we weren't here tomorrow? And I don't know. I can tell you, Everett, they have a really sweet relationship. Every family needs to figure out what's right for theirs. But what Scott and I did was, at a pretty early age, we never burdened him with Austin's, with his greatest needs. We're the parents, we're going to be the parents. He doesn't have to worry about that part, but we wanted to empower him as being a part of the family. And this is his family too. And, we wanted to make sure that he got the attention that he needed, of course, but we also wanted to really build a relationship between those two. And part of that was a certain level of looking out for his brother. So we never wanted to pile on too much and make him bear that burden again. But we did want him to take ownership that this is his brother, this is his family, we're all in this together. And, we made it a point for them to acknowledge each other. And Everett has done a really sweet job of looking out for him. In fact, when we go somewhere, Austin needs a lead, so to speak, and we usually use our pinky. And Everett's usually the first one. He's the one that does that. Now he's 13 and things have taken a real drastic turn.
That teenage years, man.
Oh, yay.
He still is very sweet, but he is definitely, and of course he is. And we want to give him his space and let him do that. But we're still going to guide that. We don't believe in the whole, kids are kids, teenagers are teenagers. Well, that's why we're the parents. So we're going to allow him that space, but we're also going to continue to direct and guide him to be thoughtful and personable with and present in our family and things like that. But still give give him more independence as he seeks it. But to the point of getting our kids more in the public, I have to share a story that the other day we were in church, and they're both at that age where they come in for worship, but then they head back into Sunday school after that with their leaders. And as the kids got up to leave for Sunday school, some friends came over to say hi to Ev, and he got swept away by that, and he normally takes Austin back there with him, but he got caught up in conversation and just left. And we had our arms up in the air like, hello, you forgot your brother. And one of the other boys in the group that had come over to say hi to Scott, because he's a youth group leader, said, it's okay, I've got him. And he immediately stuck out his pinky, like we all do. And let him back to Sunday school. But that would have
been like a teary moment for a mom. I mean,
it was very rewarding. I mean, that's such a perfect example of why it's so important to get others to, and be in their lives and not feel intimidated because they know who he is, and to be able to jump in there and say, I've got it. So that was a pretty sweet moment, but
there you go. Well, Jill, I'm going to give you a little bit of encouragement because my daughter is older than her brother. And I remember those teen years well. As a matter of fact, they both went to the same school for a while. My kids have about 6 years of difference. So when she was in 5th grade, Matthew was this really cute preschooler running around. And so they were, and I mean, literally running around. If he was in the hall, he was probably running. So I can remember when she was older, in her early teen years, and going, I really just don't want to be seen a bit with him, and the struggles that brought into play. But I remember talking to her because she was like thinking that she was going to have to take care of him forever and all this stuff. And I think sometimes with the sibling relationships, it's about telling them what the expectation is, or what you hope that the future will look like, including them in on those plans. So I'm thrilled that you made that point, is that the sibling relationship's the longest relationship. It's going to be they're going to outlive us. And so making sure that that's a good foundation is always key. And that was always something I would tell my daughter, Katie, is I'm not asking you to set aside your life and saying you're going to take care of your brother. What I'm asking you to do is that somebody's going to have to help manage and direct that. And because you're his sister, I'm expecting you to be able to do that. So,
that's a good point.
When we did guardianship and things like that, she was added as a secondary guardian in case something happened, or named as that such, so that if something were to happen devastating to both Jim and I at the same time, then our wishes were made known so that things could happen easier. Telling her that, we're going to have this trust and there's going to be money involved, but we're going to expect you to be able to step up and manage that.
Not do the day-to-day.
Yeah, do the day-to-day stuff. Not to say that you're going to be cooking meals and taking care of him. It's not, no, we have this whole plan that's kind of in place, or what we think is going to be the plan. And that we expect you to help and oversee that. But she's been so positively impacted by having a brother with special needs that she has helped. That's what she made her career choice to be. She now works in therapy. She is an occupational therapist, and she teaches kids with special needs how to swim. And so it's, for me, I feel like, wow, that was such a blessing. I'm not sure she would have been able to identify, or I wonder how it would have differed had she not had a brother with a disability. Would she have still chosen the same path? And I'm not sure.
Right. Oh, I love that. What a unique gift, what she's doing. I love that. And by the way, really needed.
Well, and she's so passionate about it. And I think that's the other thing. Like, you look at Susan's daughter and then you look at like my boys, it's hilarious because Katie has taken it to that next level type thing. And my boys are more, Ethan doesn't want a showboating. He likes it all, semi-quiet. He'll mention and he'll talk to people about autism and how it affects him and how he understands, how others that are more impacted are looking at things, and has some good insight on those things. But when he needs that assistance, it's always funny because his brothers are like, Ethan needs a minute. We're all down, like they'll come downstairs and they'll be like, so we had to leave upstairs. And it's like, okay, so they protect him, but they do it at a distance. And I think that's the cool thing. Like, some siblings are going to be more direct with it. And I think, you also have those siblings, and it's how we foster it, right? With those siblings is saying, we get it. I say it to my other two all the time. I know there's times where your brother takes a lot of my time, and I apologize, but he needs it, and you guys see that he needs it. But be there and be graceful and helpful when you see he's struggling, because that's how you'd want someone to treat you if you're struggling. So,
exactly.
I think
I love that. And I think it's really cool that I've lived in this more severe world, like Susan, for so long, that I'm always fascinated and interested in hearing people like Ethan who are able to verbalize, this is what autism looks like in me. I think that's fantastic. What a great advocate for others on the spectrum that can't do that, where he might provide some insight. That's pretty cool.
Well,
Exactly.
and I'll share with you too, because I think it's a really cool story. When he was in high school, he helped in the disability classroom. So in that more excluded classroom, he went during his lunch period. He'd quickly eat, because he can do that. I can't eat as quickly as that child ever. He'd scarf it down and he would go in and help. And I think it was so cool. And I wish more schools were more open to that. He had made a connection with one of the kiddos in the morning. He had said hi to him every morning. So then that kid asked if Ethan would come and hang out at lunch because he wasn't as impactful. And then Ethan started helping, in that room. And it was like, more of our gen ed kids need to know that it's not all sunshine and roses over here in their big old lunchroom. Go see and help others.
Yes.
We're supposed to be there for each other in this world. And it was so cool because he'd come home and he'd be like, so-and-so had a rough day. He kept trying to escape or whatever, and he'd have these really interesting stories. And I'm like, well, honey, that's this, that's called elopement. That's normal. We're escaping a behavior, or we're escaping a situation. Totally normal.
Yeah.
And we talk it out, but it was so cool because he'd sit there next to kids and he'd be like, the teacher couldn't figure out what that child wanted. And Ethan would be like, he wants this. And as soon as the teacher gave it to him, she'd look at Ethan like, how did you know that? That was not any of his normal tells or any of that. And he goes, because I understand how his brain works. And I just was like, you can't say that to a teacher like that. First off, like, they've been to college for this. I mean, this is a SPED teacher. I'm like, you can just say that you understand him, not his brain, because it just sounds so.
I think it sounded perfectly fine. I think
I do too. I kind of dig that.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, Sam, but it's like sometimes, when you talk about elopement, there's lots of ways to elope, and typical people do it. That little rectangular object that's got Facebook and Twitter and everything else. We try to elope situations that we know we should deal with, but instead we replace a substitute behavior with it.
Watching Golden Girls and playing Candy Crush at the same time. There's mine.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go away from Golden Girls and say Gilmore Girls, but I got you.
But in some ways that elopement for some of our families, that's a little bit of self-care. I need just a deep
Yep.
downtime. I need to not think about anything, but
Oh,
just
gosh,
all
yes.
all I would caution is just don't stay there that long.
That is a good caution though, because it can be really easy to stay there for a long time.
There's a few hours that get lost every so often, I'll admit. I do have a question for you, Jill. We have this lovely section. I don't know if you've heard of it, but we call it You May Be an Autism Parent If. And we love to get families' input, and wondering if you have if you have one. And
Oh, man.
it's I know you probably have 1,000 if you had time to think about it, but I'm going to put you on the spot and say, do you have one?
You may be an autism parent if you get a text from the teacher saying that your son ran down the hallway in school without his pants, and have that text inadvertently come through on a group text that she didn't mean to send. But here's the good part. It came through on a thread of friends that are all autism moms.
Oh, thank
And
God.
I just died laughing, was like, she felt horrible. I was like, don't. If anyone gets it, it's this group. That was the first one that came to mind. So,
Well, there you go. It happens.
It does.
it does happen. It does. And I'm sure we'll get to this point, but one of the things I tell people all the time is always find the funny in everything. It's a lifesaver.
Yes.
It does
I
happen.
would
Hey,
agree
he was
with that.
smiling and laughing, running down the hall naked. So if he enjoyed it, fine.
Yep. Because there's nothing else to do at that point. You just got to laugh it off.
There's nothing else to do. No.
Yes, exactly. Humor helps a lot. There are things that I remember annoying the absolute crap out of me the time it was happening. But now I look back on it and I kind of giggle, because it's like, okay, I thought that was a big deal 3 years ago. Oh,
Right.
But yeah, and it's just, take everything a little less seriously.
It is, because it can turn from something that I say to all the time too. It's just all about perspective, and we're back to that lady. The sooner you drop the "why me" thing, the better it's going to be. And she's right. It's all about perspective. I know our foundation of faith has been huge for that. I mean, not only to know the promises that God tells us, of course, and like Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. That promise goes for my son as well, and I rest in that. And it quickly broadens that perspective. And when you have that, running down the hall without your pants on becomes funny. It's not that big a deal.
Our family is God's favorite sitcom. I have one of those little box reminders. We saw that on vacation one year, and I went, that I must own. So that is on top of my fireplace where I see it every day.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Oh, goodness. Well, I want to thank you, Jill, for coming on and sharing your story, because
Thank you so much.
It is so important.
When you first get that diagnosis, it's real easy to wallow in that why us, why me. And I didn't stay there very long. All of a sudden, I was like, okay, I got to learn everything about autism now. And and of course, this was before the internet was really a thing. So it was like reading books, and it was like reading, lots of
medical journals.
Books. And
I feel like there was medical journals involved too at some point.
And
to some degree.
It was, and kind of trusting and relying on the expertise of others. That's something else that I want to put out there for families is there are professionals who have been doing this for years. And a lot of times when you're dealing with school and teachers, you're going to run into various levels of expertise and knowledge. But I always took comfort in the fact that you don't go into special ed unless you have a heart for it.
Amen.
That is
sure.
not those teachers, those aides that work in that classroom, almost all of them have a story to share about why they're there. The therapists are the exact same way. There's a reason they chose the profession they did. And when they're working with your kid, it's almost as if they're taking them on as their own kid. I mean, when I worked in special ed in school, there were a couple of kids I worked with one-on-one. And when I had them, it was almost like, okay, let's go. They were like my kid. And you were watching out for them like that as well.
Well, you're right. And the good ones out there, you're exactly right. That's how they, that is how they feel. And I have so much respect and appreciation for those teachers and staff and aides and paras and I tell them all the time how grateful I am that they chose this for their lives, because I can be Austin's mom, but I don't have what it takes to be a teacher to many like that day in and day out. So I have a lot of respect for those who where that's their calling and they know it and they live their lives accordingly.
Yeah, I agree.
This has been fun. Thank you so much, you guys.
No problem.
No, we're glad to have you. This next segment, you may be an autism parent if. You may be an autism parent if your child has a language only you understand. If you would like to submit a You May Be an Autism Parent If, please call us at 260-207-4686 and leave us a message. Maybe you'll hear it on our next podcast.
The Autism Acceptance Walk is back. Join us for an in-person, family-friendly event on Sunday, September 11th from noon to 4 p.m. at the Allen County Fairgrounds. That's 2726 Carroll Road, Fort Wayne, Indiana. There will be something for everyone at this year's event. A vendor fair with information for all the different services available to those affected by autism, regardless of their age or ability. And of course, there'll be yummy food trucks, crafts, games, music, and much, much more. The event is free to attend, but we encourage you to become a team captain and create a team that will walk together during our Unity Lap to celebrate autism acceptance and raise money for more autism programs in our community. The money you raise stays here in Northeast Indiana to benefit individuals and families affected by autism. Sponsorships for the event are still available. For more information about this year's event, go to our website at myautismally.org.
Thanks for listening. Please stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and sign up for our newsletter at myautismally.org. Talk with you next time at the My Autism Ally podcast.